Welcome to the Practice Podcast, conversations probing the nature of practice. I'm your host, Dave Piron. My collaboration with Peter Vaill, which led to this podcast series as well as our book on practice as a way of being, has put me in wonderful company all around the world for the last 4 years. And I knew it would because Peter was highly regarded by those who could remember how much impact he had on their work. One of his contemporaries, where Peter's still with us, is Ian Mitroff, well known in my field of management for crisis management leadership through many decades and unfortunately many crises. But this conversation was between two very concerned persons, Ian and me. And what was our concern? What we call the wicked messes that we're in right now. And hoping that the exclusive force of spirituality, exclusive in that only we humans can manifest spirituality from our inside out, could turn the tide, at least a few tides that are running against our democracy, against our physical and social well-being, and even our religions. Spirituality. Now, that wasn't the gist of our conversation, but it certainly has me thinking and wanting to learn more about what Ian is sharing with us. So he's got so many books, so you could spend the rest of the year just reading them, and I will read a few, I'm sure. But what's most important in this is his generosity in this conversation. We had never met, briefly in one of those Zoom sessions, but I was just one of the people in one of the boxes. Yet he was so thoughtful and interested in my teaching career that I feel honored and supported for doing this work. So here is Professor Ian Mitroff, and I'm talking with Ian Mitroff, who I will more fully introduce in the introduction to this conversation. But I rudely interrupted him as he was saying that he and my colleague Judy Neal and his colleague Judy Neal and others are very interested in moving into civic education, which is, I'm sure, something that has a great deal to do with spirituality. So, Ian, I'm sorry to have interrupted, but welcome.
No problem. That just a minor thing. My family, I grew up pronouncing it Ian, which is...
Oh, I know. Judy schooled me in that, and of course it fell right out of my head. Yeah, but I like Ian. I think that's a very musical.
Well, my wife has a saying, Ian the lion, so we say Ian the lion. So that kind of... Now, the thing is, Judy and I have been concerned about what management, spirituality, religion, MSR, what spirituality in particular can contribute to the enormous social issues we face, homelessness and political polarization, divisiveness. And one of the topics we've been holding like monthly meetings of a subgroup of MSR, of those people who are interested in the issue. And for our next meeting, we wanted to focus on civics, since that is so important. What are the different branches of the government? How do they work? How do they interdependent yet independent? And particularly since voting restrictions have appeared in so many states to make voting more difficult. What can be done to right a wrong? And particularly the polarization that I see. I mean, it's always been there. that as I approach my later years seems to me greater than in any point in my lifetime. I have never been so aware of how divided we are and how it's just captured by extremism. And in reading today, Tom Friedman's column he's an op-ed in the New York Times, my favorite newspaper. He is dearly afraid of the world that he's leaving to his children and grandchildren. And in particular, he and I see a complete disaster if Trump were ever to win again.
Oh, yeah.
And so nearing his 70th birthday, he keeps writing, and I keep writing well over my 80th birthday to see what we can do to help right this poor world that we are living in, and not to give up hope.
Yeah.
And now, one of the things that I have done in my life, that I was fortunate enough to go to Berkeley, started as a freshman in 1956, when it was dirt cheap. So a poor kid coming from a dysfunctional family, very poor, could get an education almost for free.
Yep.
And I took out government loans for room and board, which were forgiven in 6 years because I became a professor. So I got a free education, and I went to Berkeley from freshman undergraduate to master's to PhD because it was so good, and it was cheap, and there were other great schools, but they were out of reach. So I got a BS in engineering physics with civil engineering, a master's in structural engineering, and then I switched to industrial, so I could at least study industrial psychology and sociology. But the thing that changed me forever when I was getting my PhD was the 3.5-year minor in the philosophy of science, because the pressure had built up that I needed to study one humanities. I was lacking. In the philosophy of science, I studied with Wes Churchman, who was a disciple of a man called Edgar Singer, who was one of William James's best students, introduced me to the world of philosophical pragmatism, which essentially I have practiced my whole academic career. And spirituality is just one of the manifestations, because if you take pragmatism and boil it down, pragmatism's definition of truth is that which makes an ethical and spiritual difference in the quality of one's life. So in pragmatism, truth epistemology, ethics and spirituality, and aesthetics, quality of one, are all integrated. But that little word makes is key. Truth is not that which is a published paper, but it's something that makes a significant difference in one's life. So a set of ethical actions. And that's what we are sorely lacking, needing about. So what can spirituality do to help right the wrongs of this world? I don't have the answer. I wish I did, but I'll give you one other thing that I've worked on, that one of Churchman, my philosophical mentors, earliest students and collaborators, was Russ Aikoff.
Oh, yes.
And Russ Aikoff appropriated the word mess.
Yeah.
Stand for a whole system of problems that were so interconnected.
Yep.
You couldn't take any problem out of the mess and analyze it independently because the interactions were key. Well, when I was at Berkeley, there was an architectural planner, Horst Riddle, who talked about wicked problems. Problems where problem couldn't be defined by any discipline or profession. Well, welcome to the world of wicked messes. That's the world in which we live. And you don't solve them, you only cope, because they don't have a final solution. They're not like exercises where everybody agrees on the definition, on the solution. No, each stakeholder has a different definition, and they're part of the mess. And furthermore, all messes are part of one another. So the homeless mess, the financial crisis, the political mess, they're all interrelated. The COVID mess.
Yeah.
And my latest book, The Socially Responsible Organization, Lessons from COVID-19, is an analysis of the fallacious arguments people have given for not getting vaccinated for COVID. The mindlessness that has gripped far too many. So that's the kind of stuff on which I work and keeps me going.
I can see. That's intriguing. The fact that, all you've said is very familiar in many ways to me. I collaborated some years back on a book with Stephen Cavallari where we took some principles of American pragmatism, Charles Peirce in particular, and I wove a novel around them in order to teach them to a frontline worker in a call center. So I thought if we could induce a call center worker, intelligent young woman, to think more deeply, philosophically about knowledge and her knowledge and the quality of your knowledge, maybe that would spark some kind of company revolution toward everyone believing more that they had good thoughts in their head. And if they put their voice in behind them, the company could change from basically the bottom up. It was a very idealistic novel called Inside Knowledge. But when Peter Vaill read it back in 2006, he sent me a note saying, well, Dave, I knew you were a storyteller, but how did you come across Peirce? Because I always look very carefully at his work. And then I believe Peter even cited Churchman. He did in our book, that one that I put out for him as he passed away a couple of years ago. What I love is the fact that you and I'm about to be 80 in a week, and you claim to be 80, but you don't look it, you don't sound it. But here we are still doing that. We're still wanting to get words out there to people, either on print, in voice, and other images. And we're still affiliating now, thanks to Zoom, with people all over the world. I just got off a session today that had people with Peter Block. Well, that was last night, that had people from all over the world. Peter Block is still at it, just put out his new book on a fourth edition on his consultation book. So let me ask you a question. Why are we still at it?
Well, as you were talking, let me give you another thought, and that is, I have been recently writing against the pitfalls of AI. People are making all kinds of unfounded claims. The recent New Yorker has one where a guy says AI will replace teachers and will be the ultimate teacher. And yet the very thing you talked about, teaching a call center worker. And I think about all the PhD students I've had, and I will be Zooming with them later this week, where you establish a relationship with them, like I'm a mentor of a young woman here at Berkeley. And the point is, you have to make people feel comfortable that they can ask any kind of question, that nothing is dumb, that they have to ask what's bugging them, whether it's fully formed or not. And I challenge that, AI can be helpful and bounded, well-structured exercise. I have no doubt about that. And even a lot of complex tasks. But to establish a deep human relationship, because the problem is, even though I have a PhD in engineering, I'm very skeptical about a lot of technologists.
Yes.
I think that they're immature and fostering their immaturity on the rest of the world. They don't have a broad enough social sense and knowledge to understand the full context and the implications, the unintended consequences of what they're doing. And that pertains to my work in crisis management. One of the things that I've been fortunate to do is to help create a new field, crisis management. And that happened when in 1982, the Tylenol capsules were
Oh, yeah.
And I founded one of the first academic centers in the world, the USC Center for Crisis Management, and ran it for 10 years and did a lot of consulting, not just academic studies. I went out, and the organizations who contributed to the center not only gave us money, but they opened their doors so we could go in and see what they were doing. And crisis management is, in essence, thinking the unthinkable, preparing before, during, and after a crisis. And so it wouldn't have been possible without my philosophy of science and Russ Aikoff being able to think systemically. This is all about systems thinking. So the problems that we are faces are truly wicked messes. They're systemic, and they're all interconnected. If COVID, look, one of the things we should have learned that in prior pandemics like SARS and HIV, there were also dumb arguments that people gave for not getting vaccinated, but we didn't learn from them. Epidemiologists have been doing simulations for years of pandemics, but no one simulated all the things that happen, the effects on the economy, on schools, and the aged, and on the arguments that people would concoct out of fear or denial for not getting vaccinated. And I'm still not sure that we have learned all the correct lessons. Yeah, we've learned how to coordinate health departments and that kind of stuff, but that's not thinking systemically and merging the medical sciences with the social sciences.
Yeah.
That's one of the key things that we need to do. If only that, I hope, comes across in your podcast, then that's important. Do you get responses from your viewers?
Sometimes, not as many as I'd like. I'm one of who knows how many million podcasts there are out there, but I do have a pretty solid following. And of course, as a teacher, I would love to have more feedback and responses. Yeah. But I'm ready to be satisfied with what we're doing right now, which is to put something out there that people will start listening to and go, wicked messes. And then they start thinking, and who knows where that will go.
Well, one of the many books I've written with one of my first PhD students, we outline up to 20 different coping mechanisms for coping. Again, you don't solve them, you just cope as best you can. But the thing is that I think one of the most important parts of our conversation is that you know and I know that teaching is not just importing facts and knowledge, but it is a relationship where students feel comfortable enough that they can share their fears and anxieties and what's troubling them, what puzzles them, and that it's okay for them to give voice to that.
Yes, definitely.
That's key. And that's key in any relationship.
Yes. But I think what I hope I've engendered, and I picked up quite a few of my former students in some of the podcast episodes, what I've engendered is an encouragement, as Peter Vaill called it, an encouragement, that hopefully the way I taught and how we interacted with each other in our classes had people feel like, okay, yeah, I have a thought. I can give it voice. I can watch people react to it. If they don't like what I say, I'm not going to cower and cringe. And now I had a very diverse, my school is located in a very diverse part of the state. Thank God. We had people during the 911, we had several Muslim students in my management classes. And I thought, how's this going to go?
Yeah.
Well, it went quite well because the teams that I had set up and cultivated were very interested and curious about what the Muslim students would say. So we gave them a little space for that. We didn't turn it into a big deal, but I could tell there was some probing going on.
I'm curious, what were the reactions of the Muslim students to 9/11?
One came to me before the course began and asked if, and almost said, I think I'm thinking of dropping out of school. I'm feeling not threatened, I'm feeling embarrassed. And I said, embarrassed? Yeah, well, I understand that, but we don't even know much about these men who did this. But there's a lot of erroneous kinds of things that are being said. Why don't you look me in the eye, and if you come to my class, if you see yourself feeling any kind of assault because of something you've chosen in your life or your family did, we'll talk about it. And fortunately, and I think it's part, and I know this is a generalization, because my school is a working class school. These are kids who were working 2 jobs sometime to pay their way and take a full load. So it was no privilege, not even a smatter of elitism that I was aware of during that time. So it worked out pretty well. Now I suspect on other campuses which were exclusive, it would be a very different kind of conversation, if any.
This kid decided he stayed in the class, then he didn't drop out.
Both of them did. They talked to each other. They both did. And one of them, I believe, let's see, did I have him on a podcast? One of them's I followed on LinkedIn, doing very well. Well integrated into his American citizenship, which in a way takes us back to civics, because when I realized back in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, when I was doing a lot of my teaching, is that what I had thought was a requirement in my main schooling when I was growing up, civics, we had 2 years of it, that these kids would have had it too. And I was stunned to see that, no, it's out of the curriculum. Yeah. And so they had very little idea of the things you talked about, even their responsibility as citizens. However, the ones who came in and migrated to Connecticut recently, they were all about citizenship. They wanted to become citizens. They wanted to do the studies, and they were kind of curious why we so-called Americans were content with knowing very little. So that's a moment of my life, but I want to come back to yours.
No, that's fine, David. I mean, that's the point. I mean, it's like teaching, where you get to
yes.
No one. When I don't want this to be a one way. I mean, I'm interested in knowing your background, and because I think it's very simpatico. I mean, we're talking about the same thing and not so many different kinds of words. That's fine. I'm sure that's why Judy Neal put us together, and she's just great. She's smart. She's wise, and she's good at putting people together. We've been on several panels with her at the Academy of Management. Mm-hmm. In fact, my wife and I did a panel with her, because my wife, Donna, my first job was at the University of Pittsburgh.
Oh, yeah.
My wife got her PhD. And before we left Pittsburgh, we didn't know at the time that we were going to leave. She took a job at the Pittsburgh Public Television station, WQED. And her first day at work, riding the elevator, guess who she met? Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Rogers, yeah.
So she worked with, not for, Mr. Rogers. And later, Don and we wrote a book on using the fables of Mr. Rogers to teach organizational behavior. Because we are storytelling animals.
Yes.
We learn by stories. We tell stories. And the stories are the meanings of our life, our aspirations, our hopes, our dreams. And we need more good stories, not to overlook. That's why one of the things that bothers me, as I'm sure it bothers you, is book banning. That in certain states, you don't want to talk about the true history of the country with its racism, or you don't want to mention the word gay and talk about LGBTQ students, which does an enormous damage to their well-being, their sense of self. And I'm just horrified. I never thought we would reach the point, parents ought to be involved, but not in book banning. Now, certain subjects are maybe too young for young kids about sexuality. I understand that. But to have a ban through K through 12 is just, I don't get it. But that's, again, part of the culture wars. That is the big worrisome thing that I have about the future democracy here and around the world, that democracy is under threat in so many different ways in so many different countries. That is an abiding fear that I have. And so we need to talk about it. That's why with these meetings that Judy and I are sponsoring, hopefully we can give some hope to what we can do to help right the wrongs.
Are you reaching some within the Academy of Management? Are you reaching some of the younger professors?
Well, a lot of the younger people tune in. I've not been a part of it recently. That there are a lot of meetings going on under the banner of MSR.
Yes,
and a lot of those meetings have to do with methodology, the kind of methodology that people can practice. So they can study spirituality and get tenure at the same time, which is no mean feat. Now, the reason why Judy and I have moved to a more social collective is a lot of spirituality is on personal individual practice, which is fine. But I'm more interested in the collective, the social. I guess that's my roots with pragmatism shining through. Of course, the individual practice is important. Who could deny that? But it's both the individual and the group and the society. They're interdependent. It doesn't just start with individuals. It starts with the collective, with the group into which we're born. It's like you're talking about the Muslim student or the working class students that you had in your classes.
Yeah,
were shaped by culture.
Definitely.
And good and bad.
My wife and I are the same age. We're just becoming 80, and we grew up in Maine together. And we were just saying this morning, Ian, we've lived through all the bannings, the separations, the taboos, all of that. We've lived through that our whole lives. And we had the feeling until very recently that we're shedding some of those ugly shells, and we're seeing people break free. My own family had, a lot of experience with people coming out of their whatever they were hiding, and it was like it was encouraging. So when we see these political extremists who happen to also be governors and legislators trying to push us back inside those delimitations, it's painful, and it makes me angry.
Well, no, it does me too. But the feeling I have, it's as bad, if not worse, than at any time in my life.
Yeah.
I've lived through Nixon and McCarthy and all that
Oh, yeah.
stuff, red baiting. But this seems more pervasive.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, well, there's a book out that everybody ought to read, and how civil wars start, by a political scientist, Barbara Walter, at UC San Diego. And one of the prevalent reasons that starts are tribalism. And we are into the preconditions, as Professor Walter lays out, of civil war as in any time in my life. Because we have coalesced into warring tribalisms that each accuses the other, blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And the division grows. I mean, what happens in Florida and Texas and red versus blue states is incredible. I never thought it would get this bad, and didn't see it. How so much. Look, there's a book out called The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump, written by 27 mental health professionals.
Yeah.
The short of it is he suffers from virtually every known form. He's not just a narcissist, but a pathological narcissist. He is literally insane, demented. And yet, the level that people feeling so aggrieved that so many, see, what is this thing here in Tom Friedman's, he talks about it. I can't pick it out, that it's that Trump tapped in to the deep sense of resentment and anger and aggrievement of so many people. And I can understand being put down by liberals and know it better, that kind of thing. But yet, that he would become the champion of their grievances, somebody like that. In fact, Tom Friedman says he cannot win again. It'll be the end of everything that we know. He cannot. And yet the fear is there. And so this is not just a rerun of 2020. No, it's something more. It's literally the fate of the world. With those kind thoughts, those happy thoughts, and I try. The thing that keeps me going every day,
right,
is talking like the kind of talks we've had, and writing. I write op-eds every day, which come up on Medium, and most of them are commentaries and putting together stuff in the New York Times. So two seemingly unrelated articles are more related than one would think. And of course, I'm worried about all the states that have passed anti-abortion laws and will penalize people of giving funds to those who want to travel to another state. And
I know.
It's just amazing.
I have ultimate cynicism watching the exploitation of these so-called downtrodden, the ones with the grievances. My cynicism is there's a lot of money behind what's forcing that separation. Trump is not the money source by far, but I know it sounds almost like another weird conspiracy thinker to say this, but these movement apart have happened so smoothly in a way and quickly that there's got to be money behind it. And the motive of those who are putting the big money into it is they want to be free of any impediments that government may present. It's not unlike the Civil War, who didn't want to have government tell them they couldn't have their slaves. Well, I think the forces that I'm sensing, I have no knowledge particular of this, is that they just want they want the chaos because somehow or another, they think they can make more money and have more power if we could basically knock down not only national government, but state governments like Florida and Texas. So that's just a idle but somewhat self-frightening notion.
Yeah, I'm not into conspiracy theories, but what you just said makes sense. That I don't know whether it's the money, but it's the being free of all constraints.
Yes.
Don't you dare tell me what I can, like with guns. I mean, if guns were the answer, we ought to be the safest nation on the planet. We're 20% of the world's population with, 50% of the world's guns or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
We have had more mass shootings than there are days in the year, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You have a gun at home, you're more likely to result in a murder and a suicide. But the point is, the facts and reason don't get through. That is something that is really frightening. That all the good reason, the science, whatever you want to call it, is blind or is unable to get through. And that is a gap that I have seen widen, that where fears, and you want to talk about I don't know whether you talk about a conspiracy theory, but something has happened. Like, again, I saw it with the rise in these nefarious arguments for not getting vaccinated for COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And there are truly frightening. I mean, come on. Dr. Anthony Fauci is as reputable. Or recently, don't tell me that a judge knows better than the FDA about medicine that has been tested and has had vanishingly small bad outcomes.
Yeah.
As an abortion pill, that kind of thing. But that scares me as much as anything. That it would not maybe conspiracy, but the rise of extreme ideological beliefs. That's what really frightens me, extreme ideology. That my beliefs are on the other hand, I would say, I disagreed sharply with the left when I wanted to talk about defunding the police.
Oh, yeah.
When I was at USC, I consulted and did a crisis audit of LAPD. And there are bad cops, to be sure, but there are a lot of good cops. They do better with the culture, revise the culture, no question about that. The culture of policing needs to be changed. But it's like one of my philosophical mentors, Tom Cowan, who taught both Churchman and Akoff. He was a professor of law of jurisprudence. I forget the university, but the way Tom put it, the law was one of humankind's greatest inventions.
Yes.
I agree with him. And so is policing and all the other elements of government. Do they need to be checked? Of course. Does the culture need to be revised? Absolutely. But to get rid of them, and that makes no sense. That's mindless.
Yeah.
So, boy, do we have a lot of work to do.
Well, you mentioned, I know I'm going to watch the time, but I'd love to do this on, and maybe we'll have to have round two. But let me just ask this. Always the last question that comes to my mind when I mention time is one that'll take forever to answer. But we call it ideology. This group that's coalescing around the right, and I was saying ideology. But is it without spirit? Is there spirituality absent in this ideology, and therefore anything goes? Or is there any sense that spirituality has a role?
That's a good question. No, they have their own brand. See, I think they're more guided.
That's religion,
Yeah, more guided by religion. One of my former PhD student did a study using neuroprogramming to call out the differences between how people perceive religion and spirituality. Religion is more exclusive and spirituality is more inclusive.
Yes.
And so what you see are people, it's again tribalism. You see people coalescing around different tribes with fundamentally different beliefs, whether you call that ideology or whatever it is. But the beliefs are so counterproductive and so at odds with one another that I don't know what the healing will be. And maybe we, in many ways, I think we have undergone secession without formally doing it. There's something called co-cession. I don't know what it is, where it says that different state legislators can go to different states with whom they agree and in effect cooperate with them. And just to propose that, I think is that in some sense, I think we're in the process of dividing from one another. Not because I see the West Coast and the East Coast, and we're virtually in tangent. Now, that is so sad, but anyway, it's been more than good talking with you, and I hope that we will continue.
Yes.
And we'll noodle this stuff in. And I'd love to do it again, David.
Good. I'll be pursuing that. Let me come up with a wonderfully profound conclusion to our conversation. Thank God for Ian Mitroff. Really, thank all the gods for Ian Mitroff. All you've done, all you're doing, and will be doing long time from now. So,
well, I can say the same thing about you. That one of the really good things for which I still have hope is to be able to engage in really good conversation.
Yes.
Which means you don't always agree, you can challenge, but that you want to continue the conversation, that the conversation is itself valuable. We have a grandson who's about to turn 15, and he is a smart kid. And we want to pass something better on to him. He's a gifted guitarist and he's a good kid. But fear that what world are we passing on to our grandson Jonah, as we want him to prosper and do well and have a good life. Anyway, David, good to meet you, and let's do it again soon.
And yay for Jonah. We have millions of Jonahs coming up.
That's right.
And I'm really hopeful for them and for us. But thank you again.
Thank you. Take care. Have a good day.
Thanks for listening to the Practice Podcast, where we discuss practice with a capital P. If you'd like to hear more, listen in on Spotify, Automatic, and Apple Podcasts, or go to inactionresearch.com/podcast-page. And if you'd like to learn more about social inaction and the nature of practice, head over to inactionresearch.com for more information. Thank you for supporting this show. We look forward to hearing from you soon. Oh, how could I have forgotten? Our digital book on practice as a way of being is now available. You'll find it online at www.mylibrary.world. I worked on that book after Peter passed away, and I think you will find it a unique and very, very mobile reading experience, since it's wherever your screen is in hand or at hand.